Hello, lovely humans. Lisa here from Mindful Tarot. And I wanted to do another video on court cards. One of the things I've been saying about court cards, and I say it in the last video I did, is that, we don't have a lot to go on in the modern tarot deck with court cards that help us dive into the sort of archetypal, meaning-laden, intuitive, supportive framework that we're used to with our work in tarot. The court cards really only express like four different elements, and these are elements that go all the way back to the earliest medieval origins of the tarot in Europe as a deck of playing cards. And so those four elements are hierarchy, so that hierarchy of rank that we get expressed in the traditional page, knight, queen, king. And then that hierarchy itself has two further dimensions. One, the hierarchy has a quality of linear progression from either initiate or beginning or youth to up through elder, master, sort of supreme, kind of aging, experientially knowledge-based progression. Okay, so we've got hierarchy. That hierarchy can have a chronological, linear, age, or experience-based dimension. And the hierarchy also gets expressed in terms of binaries that we traditionally associate with the binary of male to female, active to passive, active to passive, outer to inner. That range of binary that the king and the queen express. And then so those are the three dimensions. The fourth that we have when it comes to thinking about court cards, the fourth element is the element of the suit itself. So cups, water, wands, fire, and so forth. It's not a lot to go on. We don't have the richness of archetypal imagery that's been present in the trump cards ever since the Middle Ages, or that has been kind of excavated or layered onto the pips in their illustrated modern form. So I talked in that video about the animal totem deck and looked at the court cards there, which in the suit of cups, which has to do with water, the animal totems that are attached to each of the cards help give a really strong reading of the ways in which the court cards can be understood in terms of an expression of mastery or agility or facility with the suit element itself. In this video, I want to explore a different deck, also looking at the suit of cups. And this isn't, neither of these videos are real deck reviews, but just sort of cross-deck explorations. So I want to look here at the Emily Carding's Tarot of the She, and her, by the way, if you're hearing munching or movement in the background, that's my dog Sylvie. Yeah, it's you, chewing her bones and wagging her tail. Thump, thump, thump. Okay, this is the thing. You talk about animal totems and then suddenly the animals just flow in. Okay, so the Tarot of the She. So I'm going to talk a little bit about her interpretation of the suit of cups and how it informs her vision of the court for that suit. And what I want to get at here, and sort of the big kind of the big idea, the little idea of this video, is to draw attention to the ways in which the court cards really, they more than any part of a modern deck, a contemporary 2016 deck, whatever you can get from Los Scarabeo or Etsy or what, your modern deck, the court cards are the part of the deck that are most vestigially holding on to the deck's nature as a playing card deck. So the reason we call, for instance, trump cards trump, it's the same reason we call the activity of winning a trick in bridge, we talk about trumping. Okay, the word trump comes from this word triumph, and at stake is the notion of how one card expresses a conquering or overcoming of another card. So I'll probably do another video about Petrarch, Petrarch's 14th century poem, The Triumphs, and talk about the relationship of medieval notions of allegorical triumphs or triumphal processions, and how that, it's been argued, how that relates to the origins of tarot. But for now, I just want to say that built into the tarot, the modern tarot deck, is this playing card notion of one card conquering another. Okay, so in the 78 card deck, we don't just have sequence, we also historically have a notion of what it means for one card to trump another. So nowhere in the deck is that idea carried more heavily, more vibrantly, more vividly than in the court cards, which have basically remained unchanged since the early days of the deck. The court cards hierarchy, right? The hierarchy that we see in the court cards, the relationship of king to queen, of knight to page, of male to female, of active to passive, of inner to outer, those relationships of hierarchy are tied to a notion of overcoming, of trumping, of conquering, of mastering. Oops, let me turn off the sound of my computer so it doesn't ding at us. The thing about that is that for many of us, we don't want to think of the relationship between the cards in terms of this card masters another, this card trumps another. Even the ways in which many of us use these cards for inner growth and exploration, I think there's still a sense that whatever linearity or progression we see in a given spread, right, whatever path we want to intuit beneath the flow of cards or the sequence of cards, even if we want to see that as progress, as moving toward greater and greater integration or clarity or manifesting things in the world or moving energy, however we understand the journey that the tarot may help us take, may support us in taking, or may help us help others take if we're doing readings for others. However we see that progression, I think most of us probably don't want to see the progression as being this overcomes that. Because I think for many of us, and I'd be really curious if folks disagree, because this is, I think, an interesting potential point of conversation. The progression we want to see unfolding through the tarot is not a progression of I overcome this with this, but of greater integration, right? So, how do we understand the court cards, given that there is this sense of mastery or triumph built into the court cards themselves, been built into the tarot deck itself historically? So, what I was suggesting with Lisa Robertson's deck is that each of these cards, there may be a sense in which the page is more playful. He's at sort of the boundaries of water and land, or she. Again, this is the blue-footed booby, and this is a deck that's about more. This is a card that's more about impulsivity and being distracted, and having your heart pulled by different things that appeal and draw your awareness. This is about diving deep, and this card, the King, expresses a kind of best integration of the fluidity of water. There isn't a sense of conquering happening here. The King doesn't exhibit more mastery than any of the other cards. And indeed, I think that squares with how most of us approach the court cards. We don't see one as the hierarchy as expressed in them as necessarily being about greater and greater mastery. But the trick with working with the court is, I think, nonetheless, how to understand the possibility of there being still some movement in linear progression, because that really does seem to be built into the system of the courts. There does seem to be built into them a kind of linearity or progression. What I like about Emily Carding's Tarot of the She is the way in which, and this is just, I want this to be a briefer video than my droning on and on videos to date. So I'm not going to say a whole lot here, but when it comes to her aim in the Tarot of the She, what Emily Carding is thinking about with the four suits is a kind of process of creation. And this process of creation does have a beginning, middle, and end, but then that end may enable us to be at a new moment for more creation. So the kind of image of this spiral that is never ending and yet has movement in it is perhaps the best visual representation of the way in which she pictures progression, which nonetheless folds back into further progression and spirals on and on. There's no beginning and no end ultimately. So when she thinks about the four suits, for her, the suits start with what we would call the swords, which for her are the dreamers, the suit of air, which is at the very beginning of a creative moment, that sort of initial thought. That initial spark of form as it wells up in our mind, in our consciousness. And so she works through that in the suit of the dreamers, and then moves into the suit of fire, of the wands, which are the warriors, where the creative energy ignites. So it's not just an idea, but now the idea has ignited through will. And then that moves into what is for her the third suit, the suit of cups, which is the suit of expressivity. So now the will has been engaged, but where does that dancing energy with the world and the emotions and our capacity to connect and communicate, where does that take place? That takes place in the suit of water, which she calls the dancers, where the medium is about expression. Finally, though, how does all of this materialize? And that happens with the fourth suit for her, which would be the pentacles or the coins, but for her is the suit of the makers. So creation reaches its apotheosis, its completion, its culmination, its consummation in the suit of makers, the earthbound suit. And then, like many of us think with the trumps, that the Fool's Journey doesn't end with the world, but then circles back to zero, to the beginning. The same kind of circulation happens in Emily Carding's deck. So now we're back to air and to dreaming. In that context of that, that spiraling motion, which is both linear but not about mastery, because one moment integrates the previous moment, is integrated in the following moment, and so forth, on ad infinitum. In that kind of way of seeing human and spiritual progress, the court cards for Emily Carding become cards that each expresses a unique gift in relation to the suit, and it's my dog is Sylvie's just down here. Sylvie is herself a dancer princess. So if I could easily move my computer to show you Sylvie, you'd see that indeed she is a dancer princess. Okay, Sylvie, go lie down. All right, I digress. Back to tarot, away from dog. Okay. So the dancer princess, the dancer prince, dancer queen, and dancer king. Each of these cards express a different relationship to the activity of communication and expressivity, the way Emily Carding sees it in terms of dancing. But each gift that they offer is essential and intrinsic to this movement. So for Emily Carding, then, the dancers each take their place in precisely a dance, right? Where we can't do without one part of the movement. Each aspect of the movement is essential for the whole. So this is how she describes dancers, the suit of water. Once the initial inspiration has been followed by the fiery burst of creativity and action, that would be the suit of wands, the warriors, the suit of fire. An emotional connection and expression must be formed. So there's thought, then there's will, then there's emotion for her. There must be a period of nurture and gestation, that watery birth of the creative in the heart of expression. And the manifestation would be shallow, insubstantial, and short-lived. Dance is one of the most pure expressions of emotional connection, transcending the language of words and cultural symbolism. The dancers speak of our emotional connection to each other, ourselves, and the worlds around us. Now, I'm not entirely won over by dancer as the right suit expression for water or the emotions. Because dance is so embodied, I have a hard time seeing the difference between it and what the makers achieve through the embodied realization of an idea. But her sense that she wants to get at pure expression, right? Not conceptualization and not that fiery impulse bursting forth of will, but instead that expressive, nurturing, gestating aspect of the creative. So that kind of creative gestation requires more than one parent, as it were. It requires more than one gift. So the dancer princess gift of expression, the dancer prince's gift of passion, the dancer queen's gift of truth. That card's pretty amazing, actually. And then this dancer king and the gift of wisdom, where the sort of the gestation has reached a point of completion in wisdom, and now something can be born. We haven't overcome anything. We have enabled something to ripen. And it's that insight of Emily Carding's that I find so valuable for thinking about hierarchy and trumping in this sense of conquering, as it is carried in what the court cards are. It's that this is a process of ripening, of unfolding, of something emerging, of a seed being planted and then growing to its completion and being born. And for Emily Carding, that process of ripening is what unfolds throughout the entire four suits. The whole of these cards are about creation. And I love that because the elements themselves, as the four pieces of what we want to attach to the suits, the elements are all about how this world comes into creation, right? Earth, wind, fire, air, all four of those must be integrated into every concrete, every existent moment of the world. So Emily Carding's expressed that relationship to the creative in the deck itself, and she's turned her court cards into the four essential aspects of that ripening, gestating, creative endeavor. Okay, all right. There you have it, folks. Thank you so much for your practice, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.